At 5 a.m. on June 10, 1912, a neighbor named Mary Peckham walked across the yard of a small white house in Villisca, Iowa, to check on the family living inside. The children hadn't let their chickens out, the curtains were still drawn, and when she reached the door, it was locked from the inside. She would later say she felt something was wrong before she even touched the handle. Behind that door were 8 bodies. 6 of them were children. The killer had covered every mirror in the house with cloth, taken the murder weapon with him, and vanished without a single fingerprint, without a single footprint, without a single witness. Over a century later, the case has never been solved. And the house, the actual house, still stands. People still walk through that same bedroom, still climb into that same attic, and many of them say they don't leave alone. This is the story of the Villisca Axe Murder House. What really happened that night, why the case collapsed, and what people claim is still happening inside those walls today. Villisca in 1912 was the kind of town where nothing happened. Population around 2,500. Farmland, rail lines, a Methodist church on nearly every corner. The kind of place where you left your door unlocked because there was genuinely nothing to fear. Josiah Moore was one of the town's success stories. He'd started as a farmhand and built himself into a respected implement dealer, selling machinery to local farmers. He was married to Sarah Moore, and together they had 4 children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul, ranging from 11 years old down to 5. On the night of June 9th, the Moores had gone to a church program at the local Presbyterian church, where Sarah taught Sunday school. Catherine had invited 2 friends to sleep over that night, sisters Lena and Ina Stillinger, ages 12 and 8. After the program, the group walked home together in the dark, said their goodnights, and went to bed. It was an unremarkable end to an unremarkable evening. Every one of them would be dead within hours. Here is what investigators pieced together and what still troubles them. Sometime after midnight, someone entered the Moore house. Not by force. There was no broken glass, no splintered door. Either a door was left unlocked, or the killer already knew how to get in. He carried Josiah's own axe, taken from the tool shed outside. He went first to the main bedroom, where Josiah and Sarah slept, and killed them both as they lay in bed. Then he moved through the house room by room, first to the children's bedrooms downstairs, then up the narrow staircase to the attic room where Catherine and the 2 Stillinger girls were sleeping. Every victim was struck with the blunt side of the axe, not the blade. Investigators believe most died without ever waking. And then, this is the detail that still unsettles historians, the killer didn't leave. He stayed in the house. He covered every mirror in the single window in the attic with clothing pulled from the closets. He left a plate of uneaten food on the kitchen table. A bowl of bloody water sat in the kitchen, where he appeared to have washed himself. The axe was found propped in a corner of the downstairs bedroom, wiped clean. By the time he walked out, dawn was still hours away. Nobody in a town of 2,500 people heard a single scream. When Mary Peckham finally got someone to force the door open that morning, what they found stopped the entire town cold. Every victim was in bed, covers pulled up, as if arranged. The mirrors throughout the house were draped in cloth. Investigators would later debate for decades why. Was it superstition, a fear of seeing his own reflection mid-murder? Was it practical, so he couldn't catch movement out of the corner of his eye? Was it something closer to ritual? Word spread through Villisca within the hour. By noon, hundreds of townspeople had gathered outside the house, some say up to 1,000, and in the chaos, before proper forensic procedure even existed as we'd recognize it today, dozens of people walked directly through the crime scene. Souvenir hunters reportedly took pieces of the bloody bedding. Whatever evidence might have existed was very likely destroyed within hours of the bodies being found. The town buried all 8 victims in a single, devastating funeral. And then Villisca did something almost nobody expected. It turned on itself. The state brought in the Burns Detective Agency, one of the top investigative firms in the country. What followed was one of the strangest and most damaging investigations in American criminal history. Suspect 1, Reverend George Kelly. Kelly was a traveling minister who'd been in Villisca the night of the murders and left town abruptly the next morning. He was known in town for erratic, sometimes disturbing behavior. Years later, he confessed to the murders, twice, then recanted both times, claiming police coerced him. He was tried twice. The first trial ended in a hung jury. The second acquitted him. Most modern researchers believe his confession was unreliable, possibly extracted under pressure, and that he likely wasn't strong enough, physically or otherwise, to be the killer. Suspect 2, Senator Frank Jones. This is where the case gets genuinely strange. Jones was a powerful Iowa state senator and Josiah Moore's former employer. The two men had a falling out. Some accounts suggest Josiah had an affair with Jones's daughter-in-law before leaving to start his own competing business. The theory goes that Jones hired a hitman, a drifter named William Blackie Mansfield, to kill Josiah, and the rest of the family were killed simply because they were there. Mansfield was investigated, even charged at one point, but the charges didn't hold, partly because he had an alibi placing him elsewhere. Suspect 3, an unidentified serial killer. Some researchers connect Villisca to a string of nearly identical axe murders across the Midwest between 1911 and 1912, all sharing the same eerie signature: mirrors covered, families slaughtered in their beds, no forced entry. If true, it means whoever did this had done it before and possibly did it again and was never caught. No one was ever convicted. Not the Reverend, not the senator, not the hitman. The case remains officially unsolved. So why did an 8-person murder in a town where everyone knew everyone else never get solved? Part of it was the era. Forensic science in 1912 amounted to little more than footprints and gut instinct. There was no fingerprinting standard in wide use, no method for analyzing blood spatter, nothing resembling DNA evidence. Part of it was the crime scene contamination. Hundreds of townspeople trampling through evidence before investigators even arrived. And part of it, frankly, was politics. Frank Jones was one of the most powerful men in the state. Multiple historians have suggested his influence may have redirected the investigation, protected certain suspects, and buried leads that pointed toward people with money and connections. Whatever the reason, the case went cold. The house was sold, resold, lived in, on and off for decades, and slowly, a different kind of story started attaching itself to it. Today, the house has been restored to look almost exactly as it did in 1912. Same layout, same period furniture, oil lamps instead of electric light. It's operated as a museum and, for those brave enough, an overnight stay. And this is where the story most people come here for actually begins. Visitors and paid investigators who spent the night report a strikingly consistent set of experiences. Children's laughter with no children present. The sound of footsteps on the attic stairs when no one is on them. Cold spots that settle in specific places, most often the attic bedroom where Catherine and the Stillinger sisters died. Objects, especially children's toys left out for visitors, reportedly moved between rooms overnight. Paranormal investigation teams, including ones with national television exposure, have recorded EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, inside the house that they claim include a child's voice and what sounds like an adult male voice. The house's current owners and caretakers have documented decades of these visitor accounts. Whether you believe any of this is a personal call, but the volume and consistency of the reports, from strangers on different nights years apart describing the same rooms and the same sensations, is part of what's made this one of the most visited haunted locations in the country. Some of the most frequently repeated accounts center on the attic itself, the room where the youngest victims died. Visitors describe a feeling of being watched from the corner near where the beds once stood. Multiple independent groups have reported the sensation of pressure or weight at the foot of the bed, as though someone sat down on the edge of it. Some overnight guests say they've heard what sounds like a young girl crying softly, only for it to stop the moment they enter the room. Downstairs, in the room where Josiah and Sarah were killed, some visitors report a heavier, more unsettling presence, footsteps that seem to pace rather than walk through. A few investigators have described a feeling of sudden, unexplained anger in that specific room, different from anywhere else in the house. Skeptics point out the obvious: expectation shapes experience. If you walk into a house primed to feel a murdered child's presence, your brain will hand you exactly that. Old houses creak, pipes groan, cold spots come from drafty period architecture, not from spirits. But even skeptical paranormal researchers who stayed overnight in Villisca have, on record, admitted the house produced experiences they couldn't immediately explain. Sounds with no clear source, temperature drops with no accessible vent or window nearby. Whatever is or isn't happening inside that house, it has never stopped drawing people back. Here's what makes Villisca different from most haunted house stories. The horror isn't hypothetical. It isn't folklore that grew in the telling. 8 real people, a mother, a father, 6 children between 5 and 12 years old, were murdered in their beds by someone who was never identified, never caught, and quite possibly never even investigated properly. Whoever swung that axe walked out of that house, back into a town of 2,500 people, and by most accounts was never seen acting strangely again. He may have sat in that funeral. He may have walked past the Moore family's grave for years afterward. That's the part of this story that doesn't need a single ghost to be terrifying. A killer got away with slaughtering an entire family, and the case simply ended. No resolution, no justice, no name. Maybe that's why people report feeling something in that house. Not necessarily spirits, but the residue of something that was never finished. A story with no ending tends to leave a mark. Over 100 years later, the Villisca Axe Murder House still stands on the same quiet street, in the same quiet town, and people still pay to spend the night in that attic room. Some come out with nothing to report. Some come out saying they'll never go back. If you ever find yourself in Southwest Iowa, the house is still open for tours and overnight stays if you're brave enough. Just remember to check the corners of the attic. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of America's most haunting unsolved cases, let me know in the comments. Do you think Reverend Kelly did it? The senator? Someone we haven't even considered? And if you want more cases like this one, subscribe, because there are a lot more doors like this one left to open.